Welcome to the Anomalous Review. My name is Michael Glosson. I'm a philosopher of science and technology, and I'm the host of the show. Today, my guest is Dr. Doug Buettner. Doug is a senior member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics and a board member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, which is the host of this show. He has his BS and MS degrees in physics from Oregon State and a PhD in astronautical engineering from the University of Southern California. He spent 30 years in the aerospace industry, and he's had a crazy variety of experience. He's been a consultant for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, where he helped build the very first machines for fabricating aerogel. He worked on the support teams for the fourth Discovery mission, the Mir Space Station, and the Mars Sojourner rover. He spent 20 years at the Aerospace Corporation as one of the directors of their Space-Based Surveillance Division, and currently he's the Deputy Chief Scientist of the Acquisition Innovation Research Center, and he teaches courses in space mission engineering at the University of Utah. In his work on UAP, Dr. Buettner is the chief technologist for Sightr.io, that's Sightr.io, which is an iPhone app that crowdsources UAP sightings. He also owns property about a mile and a half from Skinwalker Ranch for conducting his own research on interesting anomalies. Doug and I had a ton of fun talking to each other. In fact, our conversation went over 3 hours. So we've broken it up into multiple different parts. This is probably the most granular, technical, detail-focused conversation that I've had on this show. So it's definitely one for the geeks. And just a heads up, this first part especially is best enjoyed on video because Doug brings a lot of visuals to the conversation, especially when we're talking about how to debunk UAP sightings of prosaic and mundane objects. And you can watch those videos, if you're not already, on YouTube or on Spotify's video feed for their podcasts. So, enough of me. Now, my conversation with Dr. Doug Buettner. Welcome to the Anomalous Review, the official podcast of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. My name is Michael Glosson. I am a philosopher of science and technology, and my guest today is Dr. Doug Buettner. Doug, welcome to the Anomalous Review.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're out in Utah right now. I'm in Charleston. We might have some internet difficulties, but the audio feed should be good. So viewers might see us freeze, but it'll be okay. So I sent you a list of questions to begin, and you said let's just run them down. You're one of the most one of the easiest guests that I've had so far talking about that. So tell us a little bit about your background first, though. Like, where do you come from? What did you do? And what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so where I came from, I actually born and raised in Oregon. I came out of a little town called Madras in Central Oregon, just north of Bend, if you know where Bend is. And then basically went from there to Boston University for a couple of years studying astrophysics, but a little too expensive, so transferred back to, for my family anyway, transferred back to Oregon State, got a bachelor's and master's in physics there. Part of it was the master's was funded partly by a NASA student research grant where I was working on what became NASA's Stardust mission. Eventually, not only was I investigating the actual hypervelocity intact phenomena where you've got basically a particle traveling about 6 kilometers per second, we wanted to capture it intact, and so I did a lot of that research for Dr. Peter So down at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he came up, he saw my lab and invited me down to build his aerogel facility. And so I went down there and slept on his lab floor and built a capability where, when we're all done and said, we had not only used that equipment for NASA's Stardust mission, we used it to insulate electronics on the Sojourner Mars rover. It's actually been, aerogel is now pretty much used on every single Mars rover to insulate different parts.
It's like the best insulator that we have right now in material science.
It's in the top 2 to 3. Since then they've come up with some better capabilities, but it's I would just say being able to make it, and there's some stuff that Dr. Stephen Jones has done there to make it a little bit better for different types of rovers that they're now putting up. And so we also had aerogel on the space stations, both ISS and Mir,
As
to
insulation or
basically,
to capture?
no, actually as a capture medium. So we had it outside the space station. When I say we, I mean NASA did, to capture not only potentially micrometeoroids, but understand the debris environment
Yeah.
around the space station.
So you just
Um,
strap a block to it to the space station, or how do you do
well,
that?
what we did is we had aluminum grids, and you basically, when you can push it into the grid, it's self-contained, and so you're just exposing it to space, and then when something hits it, it captures it. If you get something that's a little too big, like say if you had something the size of a BB that would hit aerogel, it would not be captured if it's going low velocity, but a super high velocity capture on micro, sub BB size, like let's say a nanometer and up would easily capture it. And so they're basically trying to sample, trying to see what that debris environment looked like. Um, and then again for the after that, I don't know all the stuff they're using it for now, but I know the chemist we had brought in set some world records on least dense or lightest material
Yeah.
for quite a while. I mean, those records sell for a while. I think it just got supplanted by something different. But so
Yeah. Well,
did that.
it's a
Say
pretty
again?
amazing accomplishment. You've got aerogel that, I mean, you built the autoclave, right? Or at least one of the autoclaves.
Yep. I built the original autoclave that was used, for a lot of the original work we did there with aerogel. Yep.
So stuff that you've made in your autoclave has made it to what? Orbit? Mars?
Above orbit, Mars, a comet.
It's incredible.
So,
It's
well,
incredible.
people say you say that, and I was like, it was a job, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's
You're
that's the way
doing
everything is.
whatever.
Every accomplishment feels sort of mundane once you're on the other side
If
of
you're the guy living it, having to go do it, yeah, that's exactly right. It's mundane. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get there, and but like I told you, I mean, earlier we were just chatting, Dr. Peter So and I, I would say we had a love-hate relationship for quite a long time, but now we both look back fondly on it, and I've got a text from him now I need to respond to. But yeah, it's we did a lot, and people don't understand on just how cheaply we did it on too. He used to say I was his most expensive piece of equipment, and I had a salary about $1,200 a month, and that's before taxes.
that's
So
unreal.
yeah,
That is just, and sleeping on the floor at JPL and
yeah, sleeping on the floor next to an autoclave at 3 o'clock in the morning. Trying to figure out how to make aerogel and make it work. I mean, Peter and I would be, I mean, he would be in his office sleeping too. We were both dedicated to getting the mission done.
yeah.
And I can tell you stories about, 2 o'clock in the morning, we're sitting here trying to come up with, okay, well, this didn't work. What do you try next? And literally talking to him and having him go like this. Right?
Yeah, just fall over.
Fall asleep mid-sentence.
Well, you did it. I mean, you had a really rigorous timetable. Like there was no leeway on your timeline, right? You had to get it done by a launch date. So you
Yeah.
just did it. You just
Yeah,
packed it in.
the shuttle will go up whether or not your payload's on it or not. That's all there is to it. That's how it worked.
Wow. But you did it. That's, man, you
Yeah.
should be proud of yourself. So you moved on from that,
Yep.
and went to the Aerospace Corporation and
Yep.
various other
Spent 20
places.
years. Yep. Spent 20 years at aerospace. They paid for my PhD, got my PhD at USC. Did it in astronautical engineering, focusing on software intensive systems. Fundamentally, I was helping the Air Force with some, I'll say, gnarly embedded system problems they were having.
Hmm.
Built a team that helped out on one of the satellite systems we have up there. And now, I mean, we were going through it. It had been through two different Nunn-McCurdy breaches.
What's that?
A Nunn-McCurdy breach is when you exceed 30% schedule and cost growth on a program versus the original cost and schedule estimates for the program.
Wow.
And so, according to the Nunn-McCurdy Act, what you got to do is the Secretary of Defense needs to revalidate that program.
Okay, so you get this bloat in the program and it triggers some
It
sort
it triggers a very nasty review.
of
And so I came out here to Utah to work on a program that's actually going through Nunn-McCurdy now. And I was
they brought
on
you
it.
in to fix that problem?
They have not asked me to come in and fix that problem. And so that's to their detriment. But I know how to fix it, and I have not been invited back to help them fix it. So
That's not surprising. I mean, if problems are endemic, sometimes they are sort of clawing against asking for help or against a solution.
well, let's just say the upper echelon there and I did not exactly agree in a few things. So I left aerospace and I'm now doing what I'm doing, and they're going through a Nunn-McCurdy breach. That should tell you everything you need to know.
Well, maybe maybe they'll come to their senses and reach back.
I'm not holding my breath. Okay.
I probably wouldn't either. So, but now in your current position, you have several positions. You're sort of a multi-hyphenate kind of
Yeah,
right now.
I'm what I call an applied polymath. Um, so I'm currently the deputy chief scientist for the Acquisition Innovation Research Center, which is run by Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey. I can live out here in Utah. Basically, I spend lots of time on the computer, doing analytical work for them, and supporting kind of in a liaison role between Office of Secretary of Defense and different university researchers. And so, kind of help each side understand the other side, if you will.
Yeah, and so
Um,
I used to I developed an engineering ethics curriculum for the University of South Carolina for their engineering school, and one of the chief problems that we run into in that world of sort of philosophers and engineers is this need for like an engineer whisperer that exists between the corporate side or the state side and groups of engineers. I can imagine a very similar problem arises at the interface between government, military, industry world. So you're kind of situated in that space, whispering between all these or doing the liaison work.
that is one way of looking at it, yes. So,
Do you enjoy that
uh,
work?
you know what? It's like anything else, it's a job. It's definitely interesting. And the thing I really enjoy about it is I get exposed to all different torps types of analytical approaches. And so, you sit there and you learn something new on a weekly basis, different approaches for different problems
And that's just
because you're
rewarding
working
for you, like different ways of thinking and approaching, like problem solving and analysis.
exactly. That's a good way of looking at it. I mean, right now, one of the things is like, most of my career has been spent, down being the guy behind the curtain making the crap work, right? And so now I'm kind of elevated up to where I'm more facing and some of the feedback I get, I got to start acting like a deputy chief scientist, right?
Sure.
Versus, and so it's a different mindset and as our executive director calls it, a different mental model, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, having to go through it and learn it is for me it's enjoyable. I get to learn things. I get to work with some of the best minds the country has to offer, and that's been fun.
That has to be super stimulating. I mean, I find myself um, the thing that's most taxing and sort of soul destroying for me is being in a place where I feel like I'm not growing and intellectually, I'm not being able to engage in new things and like learn new stuff and find out new worlds of knowledge
Exactly.
to explore. Yeah.
In my experience, at about the 5 to 7 year mark, I pretty much exhausted. Aerospace kept me busy for 20 years. I will give them that.
Yeah, there's a lot
Able
to
to
learn. And doing acquisitions now, you're working with, you were saying earlier that you work with acquisitions on everything, anything that the military is trying to, is it
what they're,
military
I
or government
mean,
in general? Government in general is trying to,
yeah, the data analysis on their data, basically how you actually do requirements in the JSIDS process with the Joint Chiefs. if you go look at Eric's website and you look under the PPBE, which stands for Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution, um, fundamentally that entire process, we were working with the Senate Commission on that. And you can go look at the reports and you can see stuff that, we wrote that directly went into their final report. And this is fundamentally changing how we build our systems and how we acquire them. And so we were very, very instrumental in some of that research too.
And one of those, to move over into the UAP topic, one of those um, sort of acquisition programs that you've written a paper on, I'm not sure if it's just a white paper or if it's actually published. I don't have it in front of me. Was about how to help acquire better software systems for analyzing and identifying anomalous, aerospace objects, right?
Oh, so yeah, okay. So the one you're talking about is the okay, so going back a little bit in history. So not this past SCU conference, but the prior conference, there was a UAP sighting by 5 different pilots on 2 aircraft over the Pacific Ocean, and it had a very cylindrical look, from
Hmm.
the pilot's viewpoint, and so they actually had some photographs in a short 16-second video of it. And so what happened was I was just pretty much brand new to the SCU. I think I'd only been a member for about 3 or 4 months. And so when the conference came up, I listened, and I was one of the guys that was trying to ask questions during it. And so when it was being provided, I fundamentally tried to ask the question, did you model it? Specifically, somebody had asked the question if it was Starlinks. Well, apparently somebody looked at it and answered, and it wasn't Professor Griffiths, University of Hawaii, it was somebody else that they had looked at it and they didn't believe it was Starlinks. Well, what happened was Mick West came out pretty quickly and identified it as Starlink satellites. And so that Wednesday, I said, well, I've got the software to model it. I'd be happy to go in and just kind of do an independent look for you. And so, as part of aerospace, employees can have software that's called Satellite Orbital Analysis Program. It's called SOAP. And it's been under development since the 80s. And it's a very sophisticated piece of software that we use to analyze constellations. NASA uses it for some of their missions. And so you're able to actually, put a 3D model of a spacecraft up, and you can watch its orbit. You can, you know, you change its orbit from like leaving Earth to going to Mars to, whatever you want to do, right?
And you use
And
just the
so,
videos and images to create that?
well, what I did is I used the videos and images, so that identified when they saw it, right? And Dr. Griffiths had taken and analyzed the video to figure out what constellation the UAP was in. And then what I did is from that information, I was able to go off and we had ADS-B data from Dr. Little for the actual of like two or three of the flights, but I was more interested in the flight with the actual photographs were taken. And so we got that loaded into SOAP. That was a little harder than we had hoped, but we got that in there. And then we have to go to another website to actually download the actual what are called TLEs, which stands for two-line elements. Two-line elements, a format from NORAD used to characterize the orbit of satellites.
Hmm.
Think of it as a state vector, but in circular or elliptical
Sure.
coordinates. And so what you're able to do is you can go to Celestrack and you can download those TLEs for a specific time. But when I was trying to download them, I wasn't getting the time as close to the actual photograph as I could. But I was able to initially tell Professor Griffiths, "Yeah, no, it's Starlinks." In fact, when I finally had a chance to do it, it took me a couple hours, but I was able to say, "Okay, I got good news and bad news. Good news, I got the data into so bad news, they're exactly in the right place at the right time."
Yeah.
So uh, what I then recommended to him is like, well, I've got my class starting up. Why don't I have, my students go off and model it?
Oh, interesting. I
In
bet that was fun for them.
Say again?
I bet that was fun for them.
Yeah, yeah. No, they enjoyed it. In fact, one of my students that I actually had talking at the conference, when he interviewed for his internship, he told me that they spent 10 minutes asking him about the paper and what he learned using SDK and stuff. So it helped him land a nice internship. So
With SCU?
uh,
Or,
no, the internship was with the company in Colorado Springs, just one of the local defense contractors there.
so you
So.
identified it as Starlink, but using a very different methodology than Mick West did. I mean, you have totally different.
Well, I could tell Mick West had also loaded up TLEs, but he had the same problem that I did initially, i.e., you have stuff all over the sky. You can see it's in the right spot, but it didn't match exactly what the photograph showed.
Hmm.
So T.S. Kelso is actually an academy grad, so I'd reached out to him. I'd contacted him in the past. He probably vaguely remembered me, but so what I did is I acted as the very stupid scientist and rocket scientist and worked with him to I would say improve the ability to download these.
Yeah.
And so he literally changed some of his queries to make it a lot easier for people to do this.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So
Yeah,
that's
so
progress. I mean, that's progress. And
yeah, that's progress. So what we did in the paper and the most recent paper that's out on the actually in my URL from the paper itself, we've updated it to describe how you actually utilize the new method to download. And then at the SU conference, that's what we talked about too was a couple of those approaches for downloading it, and then trying to align the time. So you want to get the UTC time off the photograph, and then with that UTC time, when you download the Starlinks, then you want to do is you want to basically do a one-to-one mapping, right? And so you want to get that time as close as possible for all the different satellites and that specific payload launch.
so
So.
is this like close to ideally how you would want to do UAP identification, or what would
Well, what I also tried to do, and now you're going to get to my ideal situation, is I also had tried one of the students to do what we call physics-based modeling. Into there, you want to do the rendering, so you can actually have the same visual thing that the pilot saw or the witness saw. Because what I want to be if my dithers in my perfect world, we'd have a group that would be off modeling these as they happened, and maybe even coming up with, I would say, automated methods to, basically put, okay, you said you saw something here. All right, well, you had the ISS. I don't know if you watched the new show the other night on Discovery Channel with Chrissy,
Mm-mm.
but have the ISS going overhead, right? And being able to model that and being able to show that witness, this is what you saw, right?
Oh, interesting. And like reproduce a sort of, I mean, a simulated model of what they
Yeah,
would have seen and see if they say, oh yeah, that's exactly it or not.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, we can get there. It's just very computationally intensive. And one of the things we were able to do in the paper was say, okay, the students selected software called Blender.
Mhm.
Blender is primarily used by the animation movie industry, if you will, for different projects. And so it's quite capable, but it couldn't do a good job, or didn't do a good job reproducing what we were trying to reproduce. And part of the problem has to do with how far the satellites were away from the aircraft at the time. And the problem is when they're that far away, it's only got so many pixels
Sure.
dedicated to that part of the screen, if you will. And so we tried a couple of different methods. One was to move it a lot closer, which came out okay. But I wanted to put it at the right distance, right? And then try and visualize it. And you can kind of see a streak. And then I wanted to try, with the satellite solar arrays deployed and not deployed, because the Starlinks basically have three different deployments. One is not deployed, one is what they call a knife edge, and the other one's what they call the shark fin. The knife edge is what they use when they're boosting it up to the final orbit.
Mhm.
And then the shark fin. So you imagine the satellite like this, and you got the solar array coming up like this.
Sort of orthogonal to the ground or perpendicular.
Precisely, precisely. And so the shark fin for the flaring situation that you see a lot of people talking about, and I know I've seen it even on McWest's website, that's the orientation that the satellite is mostly in with those flares. And unfortunately, that was not the situation we were in at this part of the orbit. It was in this knife edge. So the other thing I was able to point out is I don't know what the actual orientation of those individual satellites was. I had to assume.
Hmm.
And anytime you have to assume, you can make an ass out of you and me, right? So,
And
so
Starlink's
we did
probably
the
not
best we
going to tell
could.
you, right? You probably can't call Starlink up and ask them about the orientation of their
You
satellite.
know what? We sent them emails and like any other citizen asking them questions, they just ignored us.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So,
So going forward, like how can we better identify and separate a truly anomalous UAP from sort of prosaic mundane objects? Like, I mean, not really.
well, you know
Satellite
what?
is
We
mundane.
we can do we can do what we can do with I would say the sensor systems we have out now, right? Cameras, cell phone cameras, security cameras. I'm a big advocate for data integrity methods. I would love to be able to have, if I get a photograph, I want to have the original photograph. I want to have the original movie. I want to get away from JPEG compression. We're getting to where we can put terabytes in these little embedded systems. Stop compressing videos, please. Stop compressing images because that takes away a lot of the fine detail. It makes it a lot harder to analyze. I want to be able to tell if a video or an image has been monkeyed with,
Mm.
right? If it's been falsified. So the data integrity for me, and I'll bet you a lot of scientists, is going to be one of the biggest issues that we need to resolve.
And you'd want to see that on
Um,
like cell phones and doorbell cameras and everything.
that would be where I'd want to go. I mean, because I get frustrated when, and there was a great case, somebody on Twitter had pointed, or X or whatever you want to call it now, posted some video where he's got a security camera and you see these little orbs going around. And he says, and on Skyfire News, he's saying, "Oh, I contacted scientists and nobody's gotten back to me." And I was like, I said, "Okay, great. Submit your stuff to Enigma Labs or MUFON, and then have them reach out to me, and I'd be happy to analyze it for you." And nothing. And so then I posted one of my favorite videos of Spanky doing this, right? Okay, I'm waiting,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's like, "Well, what's that for?" I was like, "Okay, well, here's the thing. You submit it to one of those things, so I've got the original video to analyze, and I'd be happy to analyze it." And I'm still waiting. Okay, and that was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean,
So
and a lot of people don't understand I mean, even in the intricacies of issues like compression. A lot of people don't understand that if you take a image with your cell phone, it's trying to save space, so it cuts out, huge number of the pixels and then later makes guesses about what those pixels should contain. And if you want somebody to make a conclusive, conclusion about what the image is really of, it's almost impossible when it
it
once it's
it it becomes very difficult when it's compressed. Yeah. One great example, I was working with Ben Hansen on this UFO over in New York City. Um, and so, he and I were working together a little bit on the Starlink stuff. And so he found out I knew how to do this analysis. So he started sending me all this stuff to analyze.
Hmm.
And what was funny is he sent this one to me, and I looked at it, and the first thing I do is I extract out, cut pixels around whatever the object is, and I do super resolution, right? So the first thing I could tell is, well, it wasn't compressed, which was great.
Mhm.
At least it wasn't JPEG compressed. The second thing is I could tell it was an authentic video. And I won't get into all the details there because I don't want to be in an arms race with people that want to falsify their videos or images. And then the second thing I could tell that was frustrating is it wasn't the original. And so what I started doing was, okay, first thing I did was not only did that do that cutout and look at it, I wanted to figure out where it was, right? So I took the bridge, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge.
Mhm.
I just took that and then shoved it through Google Lens and came out with, okay, this is the bridge. And then from the bridge image, and in fact, if I can share,
Yeah, you can share your
is
screen.
it, I,
I see it.
okay, so one of the things I could see is I had this stuff down here in the bottom of the video, right? This is the very first frame this object showed up in.
And this is
And
from
so,
that cylindrical object that turned out to be a Starlink satellite?
no, this
Oh,
this
okay, good.
UFO
Yeah.
over New York City,
So very,
that,
very low in orbit.
well, I'll get back to what it is in a second.
Yeah, okay.
So, so fundamentally, what did I have? I had, this video. I could tell it was probably New York somewhere. I've been in the Bay Area too, and I could tell that wasn't the, San Francisco bridge. But one of the things you see here is the shadow. So we knew it was the video was taken on March 25th, according to the Reddit poster. And so what you can do is you can take that shadow and you can put it into this application called Shadow Map. And when I did it, you can see I did it on March 30th. It was 5 days after the video was allegedly taken, right? And so I was able to come up with a decent estimate on the time of day based on what that shadow
Yeah,
was
it just
using.
uses the bridge's support beam like a sundial, basically.
You got it. That's it. And exactly. So you're asking me, what is shadow analysis? And that's exactly it. I'm looking at information available in the image, right, to get more information about the image. And so, once I knew where it was and I knew when it was, then we could start looking at what flight she was on. Now, one of the things that kind of flew us or threw us for a loop, and here I'll stop the sharing now, um, was the fact that the Reddit poster had said it was a flight out of Florida.
Hmm.
Well, what ended up happening was Enigma Labs had contacted Ben Hansen about some of the interesting stuff they were seeing. And oh, by the way, there was this video from the lady that actually took it. And Ben was like, "You got the witness?"
Oh,
So he was able to go interview her, confirm that in fact she did not post that video on Reddit, did not know who that poster was. And so whoever did post it, what's ironic, in both Ben and I had reached out to him independently, trying to find out who the original witness was so we can get the original video. So now that Ben had the original video, we knew exactly what flight she was on. We figured out that I was about 30 minutes off. I'm going to attribute part of that to me, doing it on the 30th versus
yeah.
paying to do it on the 25th, so 5 days removed. But then I was able to come up and from the actual video and knowing the actual flight, so I got the ADS-B data, be able to create a KMZ file in Google Earth, able to identify exactly where that image was taken, utilizing the information in the video, knowing the frame rate. And so, now I got a lot more information. I can do a
Sure.
lot more with it, right? And specifically, if you look at the Reddit posted, you never see the wingtip of the Spirit Airlines that she was on. We found out she was flying out of Myrtle Beach,
Mhm.
South Carolina. She was not flying out of Florida. We knew exactly what seat she was in,
That's amazing.
So I'm able to now go get CAD models of the actual aircraft. I can tell you how far that wingtip was off the side of the airplane. I know about how far she was from the window.
That'll give you some sense of scale, maybe, for the object
Yes.
identification. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a lot more information. And so I likened it to a game of Clue, right?
Yeah.
And so fundamentally it's trying to go through and utilize the evidence that you have to try and get to a root cause. Now, I will tell you, when I first saw this object, I had two big candidates. One was a balloon, and the second one was a UAV operating at an illegal altitude. Okay. Because I could probably have my mechanical engineering students build something like that.
That
And
would go
then,
that high? That would go into like commercial flight school?
I think so. I think we could. One of the things I would be doing though is I'd probably making it aerodynamic. All my stuff would be on the inside. I'd be using carbon composites. I'd be, trying to make it as light as possible. But I think we could probably build that. Um, but again, a balloon was my number one candidate, and UAV was my
And
second.
do you mean
So
like a publicly available Mylar balloon that you get at a grocery store for birthdays, or some sort of weather balloon, or
hold that thought.
okay? Oh no. Okay. That looks
So just to tell
very
you how
convenient.
detailed I get, I went and bought some of these bad boys.
Wow.
Okay, and if you got this video, if you got this balloon at just the right angle, right? See if I can rotate it here around.
Absolutely.
Look familiar?
It looks, I
No.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
easily
Take
could
that
be the
and
object.
push it back. That this is I tell Ben Hansen I'll give him probabilities. If I'm above 60%, I'm confident. If I'm above 80%, I'm very confident. If I say I'm above 90%, I'm pretty damn sure.
Yep.
Right? But I'll give myself 10% for error. And I told him I'm probably about 90% now.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
I,
what we did at the SCU conference is I actually bought multiple of these. I took one with me, and Nick Gold and I went out during one of the breaks after I had talked, and basically I brought a tape measure, a very long tape measure, one of those big roll spool ones, and went out in the parking lot, and literally he videotaped me going out there in 10-foot increments. And so one of the last pieces of analysis I did is using a phone, an iPhone 12, which she had, and then he had an iPhone 12 Pro. We compared the optics, made sure that was good, and then I was able to now tell you, okay, that balloon was at about 94 feet from the camera.
so you've solved it pretty well. I mean, there's still some possibility that it was a UAV or
Like I said, I'm at better than 90%. I will leave 10% for somebody to come up with some other smoking gun evidence. But again, it'd have to be evidence that would have to sway me off of 90%.
what would that
Right.
evidence be? What would get you off of it?
Oh, for me to get even above 90%, what I did is I took the winds aloft. That's something McQuest did not take into account. And the winds aloft, I went to Iowa State University, had it archived for that specific day from Kennedy, which is actually a lot closer to the aircraft at that time. The winds aloft at that time were about between 30 and 33 knots coming from 70 degrees. So, add 180 degrees to that, and that tells you the direction it's going from north, right? So 250 degrees from north. The aircraft, he and I agree on this almost exactly, within about 2 miles per hour, or no, within about 2 feet per second, excuse me.
Mhm.
Because the plane was doing about 207 knots. And so what I do is I used interpolation between the ADS-B points, the frame rate of the camera, right? So I'm able to tell you pretty close where the 5 images showed up in her video.
Mhm.
And then from the time, right, I interpolate, okay, the last ADS-B point, it was here going this fast. And the next ADS-B point is going here, going this fast. ADS-B is very accurate for XY position. It's less accurate for altitude. And there are also some additional things you need to do with ADS-B data because it's based on barometric pressure. You have to convert that into an orthometric height. So if you watch my SCU video, I tell you how to do that, or read the paper, I tell you how to do that. And so there's a lot of analysis that goes in to make sure you've done it right. And so and I heck, when I do it the first time, sometimes I make mistakes. That's why you have people looking at it, peer reviews and scientific process, right? Um, so
But this is a great, just a great case study to demonstrate the level of like rigor and the tools
The
involved.
level of rigor that needs to happen, right? And so, when I saw this one guy's video online, I'd be happy to go in and take a look at it. But here's my take on what I saw. My take on what I saw is if I took one of my mechanical engineering students and I told him, I said, all right, I'm going to go take some security video with my security camera outside. Your project, by the end of the term, is go build me a CAD model of what you see in his video.
Mm,
I want you to take that CAD model and I want you to run it through like 3ds Max or some of the other visualization types of software. And I want you to make it look as realistic as possible. And I want you to inject it into that video. I'll bet you money I can do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay. So when I talk about data integrity, when I talk about the integrity of the images, when I talk about I want to see the original video, that's what I'm talking about, is because me as a scientist, I'm not going to put my reputation on the line analyzing something that I can't be fairly confident is original.
yeah. If you could fake it, then
If I can fake it, I ain't analyzing it. Or if I am analyzing it, I'm just gonna, don't be afraid if I come out, or don't be mad if I come out and say it's a fake,
sure,
right?
yeah,
Or this is the probability I have of being
yeah.
fake. Like I said, right? I told Ben I will always give you a probability statement.
Oh,
So
but that puts the bar pretty high for what it would take to produce really convincing
yes,
evidence. Well, I mean, and it should be a
yes.
high bar, but like a lot of people will say, I mean, the public perception, you'll hear people sometimes say, "Look, we've got cameras everywhere. There's like CCTV and people have like doorbell cameras and cell phones. Why aren't we getting tons of great footage of UAP?" But the sort of framework you're laying out for how these things should be analyzed demonstrates that like our tools just aren't the right tools. Like a doorbell camera
Our
is set to
our
work on a
tools need to
certain
mature.
frame. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
they
our
were
tools need to
designed for that.
mature.
Yeah. What would that look like then?
All
Like,
right, say that again. You broke up.
oh, sorry. Well, yeah, our tools just aren't designed for that sort of thing. Like a doorbell camera
It,
shouldn't be designed to capture UAP images.
no, it doesn't. But the thing is, it's being used for that, right? Or your security cams are being used for that. So I'm just trying to say, if you want me to analyze your security camera video, you need to provide me with the original video, and I'm going to go back to the camera makers and I'm going to pull that video apart. I want to be looking at the frame rate. I want to be looking at whatever information is in their image format that will allude to whether or not it's been faked or tampered with, right? I'm going to go through and I'm going to do all sorts of advanced image processing on it that, you'll have to, pull up the volume of books I got behind me right here to fool me. That's the kind of stuff that I need to play with on original video.
So how did you get convinced that UAP are a genuine phenomena that are truly anomalous? I mean, you have a very high,
So that's going to go back into my background. Okay.
yeah.
So when I was growing up as a kid, my mom would always tell us that, she saw UFOs when she was a kid. And so she tells a story where she was young. I don't know if she's seven or seventh grade or something. Anyway, she was out playing with a friend, and she says she saw two orbs in the sky. Make sure I get the orientation right here for the camera. And she said they just like, she's like, what are those? And her friend looked up, and then she goes, they went and took off. And then she also tells a story to where she thought it was before she was born. I actually used Robert's UFO government, actually this UFOs and government book
That's a great book.
um, to figure out. And it was kind of funny to talk to Robert. He goes, "Don't drink it. Just use it as reference." And I go, "Okay, that's what I've been using it for. Good." um, but figured out exactly which sighting it was that my grandfather apparently saw. And
Oh,
my
way.
grandfather, like, he passed away before I was born, but he tell he would apparently tell a story to where he saw an alien spacecraft in a field and saw aliens running around it. So I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing for what mom says, but that's it in a nutshell.
And he
And
reported
so
it
that's
himself
what
or
your
others reported?
second or third kind.
Did he report it?
That specific report, you can look it up. I don't know if he reported it, but I do know that's what he sells. My mom never gets, she apparently, so we figured out that she was probably about 2 years old at the time. And unfortunately, all my mom's brothers and sisters have passed away. It's just us cousins now that are left around. And my mom is the last surviving member of her family. She was the youngest of five. But I don't know if he reported it, but I do know if you read the excerpt in Robert's book, basically it was police were involved and things of that nature. So
Yeah. People would be amazed at how many case studies there are like that. I mean, we just have
yeah,
credible this. I mean, we say I'll say credible evidence like police reports, but they're the question of whether they're credible or not maybe is an open question. But they're at least the exact same sort of documents that are used to like prosecute people for crimes and things. So
yeah,
we have to give them some level of credibility. That's amazing. So
yeah.
that's what got you interested from the beginning. You had these
Well,
stories.
I would say that intrigued my interest,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, as a kid, I remember getting a book called UFOs and reading it, with some interesting stories in it. A lot of this, Betty and Barney Clark type stories and the other ones. Um, and then there was another situation where my ex-father-in-law, who was a chiropractor, had ties to the Vatican. Apparently, the Pope's right-hand man was in the U.S. Stopped by to get an adjustment from my ex-father-in-law, and he reported that the reason this guy said he was in the U.S. was because he was checking up on some aliens that the Vatican had given to the U.S. military.
Alien bodies?
So aliens, like live aliens,
Would that have
and,
been
and
Pope
uh,
John the 23rd or something? Or
oh, I don't know what pope it would have been, but there's some story about after World War II. I
yeah,
saw that just recently within like the last year. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, deja vu. I remember. Right.
yeah.
So, I mean, when I hear that kind of stories, it's like, oh, okay, interesting. Because I personally have never seen anything I couldn't, with my own eyeballs, I couldn't identify or come up with a logical explanation. Um, Now, in my property out near Skinwalker Ranch, I've got, some security cameras out there, mainly just the trail cams. I'm going to be moving towards better equipment here, hopefully shortly. But one of my trail cams got something on it that I can't explain.
What is it?
Um,
How would you describe what it is?
well, I'll tell you what Jay Stratton called it. He called it Norb. Um, let's see. I'll pull that up here. You don't mind my doing my sharing again like I did before. Okay, so I'm going to show you first a normal nighttime image from the camera. And again, I'm going to share. And again, I just call it a light anomaly at this point. But so let me know when you can see it.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, so this is a normal nighttime image. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So what you're seeing here is some tree branches we cut down here. See part of the tree it's up in. I've got and these are Russian olives, all of these. I've got a house across the street here. It's basically a mobile home. And then you've got another light from another mobile home that's off in that direction.
Okay.
Okay, this right here. Now I'm going to pop open a daytime shot. Same image, so you can kind of see what you're looking at. There's the branches, there's the Russian olives. You can kind of see that mobile home right there. You can kind of see maybe down in here, there's another mobile home over here, right? This right here is basically a trailer that my neighbor has. This is a basketball hoop, obviously. This right here is a cottonwood. You can kind of see a pile of stuff right here. I wish it was still there. He's completely changed what's over here now. But my recollection was this is just a pile of junk, if you
Okay.
will,
Yeah. It looks like
right?
a barrel or a grill or something.
Yeah, one of the things you can do is this kind of thing, right? And so you can see the JPEG compression. You can see why I hate JPEG. Um, see what it does to the image, right? Just completely pixelate,
Yeah.
it's
Grainy.
chopping up information. But there's literally a pile right here. This right here is a gate that's jetting over into my property. My property line goes right along here. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the anomalous image. What jumps out at you?
Oh, well, there's definitely new lights. Uh,
Yeah, there's a new light right there.
yeah, which would be sort of in front of the cottonwood, I think, maybe.
Yeah, the cottonwood's right here.
Yeah.
And so the trailers right here. The first time I thought saw this, I thought, well, maybe because there's a road right here. I thought, well, maybe what I have is a vehicle coming down this road, and the light just happens to be hitting the
Yeah.
tail light on this trailer, right? That's the first thing that came to my mind. But one of the things you'll see is there's a couple of reflection spots right here that are being JPEG. So this is literally on the edge of that fence or that gate, excuse me, I was telling you about. And that, I believe, is being reflected off that pile in the back. Um,
Which would put the
and so
light source in front of it
of
rather
that
than.
pile, right? And so I showed this to Jay. I showed him the other things. He goes, I think you caught an orb. I go, Jay, I'm not going to call it an orb. I'm going to call it a light anomaly. For example,
Fascinating.
I showed it to Rich, and Rich goes, "Well, those trail cams have got issues." And I said, "I know." I said, "I'm with you." I said, "This was a check-in image for me to capture something anomalous on a check-in image, and a check-in image is basically the trail cam will give you a daytime image and then a nighttime image, basically telling you the camera's still live, nobody's ripped it off, right? And I'm still working." But I can tell you, I've got lots and lots of images out there. I've never seen anything remotely like this ever again. I've got movies of trucks and cars passing here, and I never see anything
Yeah,
being
nothing
illuminated.
reflects or glints in the way that would produce this. Okay.
That's right. I can't. I mean, my light from the camera, the IR source, never illuminates anything back there such that it's reflecting that much. I can go on and on. But I can't. It's for me, it's something I can't answer. All I can say is it's a light anomaly that I can't explain.
What's interesting to me about this is that I have a completely different brain than you, but when I look at an image like this versus the image of the what is almost certainly a balloon from that uh, plane
Hmm.
picture, the, they're about equally weird looking to me. My brain is sort of like, yeah, it could be, maybe it's something weird, but also maybe it's blah, blah, blah. But you who have this vast sort of array of technical knowledge and expertise at your hands, uh, are much more impressed by this image than the latter because precisely because you know not only the terrain itself because you own the property, but because you know what these tools are capable of and what should and shouldn't be visible in
Right,
something.
right.
Uh,
The
and it shows that what amounts as what amounts to good evidence or impressive evidence or anomalous evidence isn't always apparent just by looking at the image. You have to have a lot of know-how to be able to sort these images in a way that says, well, this is what's strange and this is what's probably a balloon.
right. Let's go to the UFO over New York City example with the balloon, right? Um, it was just absolutely from me looking at the Reddit posts. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a helicopter. And I'm like, oh my God, people,
Not
really?
any.
And so that's but I've been doing this for a long time, and not specifically analyzing these images. I mean, I used to do satellite imaging analysis for the Air Force, and so I just having picked things apart. The reason I tell you I hate JPEG is because of this kind of stuff, right? I'm getting data that is being corrupted because of the image compression. And it's kind of funny with this specific camera situation. I've got an identical camera out on that property facing north, and what I get is a fisheye type appearance in the camera.
Hmm.
And
It
so it's like,
sort of globed out the image itself or something.
so let's show you. There we go.
Okay.
Now you can see it.
Yep.
Daytime image from that camera looking north. Okay. You can see how far the tree is away. I mean, so just so you can go step back. So this is from November 19th of last year. Slightly cloudy. Now I'm going to show you what the nighttime image looks like. Let me come over here and you'll see the nighttime image.
Hmm. Oh, that's very weird. Yeah.
Okay. So, possible, let's go through the possibilities, right? Fog. Okay. Well, okay, but why is every single image at nighttime look like this? It's not foggy every single night out there. The next possibility, moisture on the lens. Okay. So that was actually one of their first hypotheses. So they said, okay, get this stuff you put on, and I can't remember the name. It was like red frog or
Yeah.
something.
Anti-fog sort of solution or
Yeah,
something.
it's an anti-fog, like what divers and people with sunglasses put on their glasses, right? And put that on there. No effect. So then they said, okay, well, why don't you send it back to us? We'll tear the camera apart. We'll make sure that there isn't any moisture on the inside of the lens,
Hmm.
i.e., internal components of the camera. Sent it to them, got it back, same exact problem. Sent it back to them again. They're like, all right, if we can't figure it out, we'll replace it. And they did all their stuff and said, nope, passes all the checks, looks good, and so before I deployed it this time, what I did is I deployed it at my house here and outside of Ogden, and I had it pointing north. The images, I may have had a few with like kind of like a rainbow effect over the top of it.
Hmm.
And so by that I mean over the top like this. But what I correlated that to was just the nighttime image when it was being taken. The sun would still provide a little bit of internal reflection off the camera and the lenses in the camera. So I had just a little bit of that kind of thing going on. And then specifically the other potential cause of that when I had it here at my home is I have a light on a barn off to the left here. And so I thought, okay, it's resolved. I deployed the camera out there, same exact problem.
Is it always centered in the same way, like on the tree?
Always centered exactly the same way. Now, the only thing I can think of at the moment that it might be, and so I've got a couple of experiments. I told the company, obviously reveal here, that I wanted to do, and now they're intrigued, right? So I showed them this thing again. They're like, all right, we're going to replace the camera. I go, well, no, hold off. I go, I'm not done, verifying what the cause is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that other camera you saw, which I know works fine out there. I'm going to flip it with this camera, so it's in opposite locations. The other thing is the tree it's in has got a split in it. So I've got literally two very large trunks coming up together, and it's sitting kind of in a location to where it's nestled up against one of them. My current hypothesis is maybe the IR illuminator on it is bouncing off that tree and it's being reflected back into the lens.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
the only thing I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, these sort of crescent shapes, the fact that these crescent shapes kind of converge in a distance is making me wonder if there are multiple lenses inside that are somehow ref
Somehow that reflection's going on. Yeah, I can't answer the question. But um, when I told them, because the reason they're intrigued is as I said, okay, guys, let me tell you where this camera is, right? Because they can go log into it, but they really haven't paid attention to where it's situated. I go, have you watched Skinwalker Ranch series? And they was like, well, no. And I said, okay, UAPs, UFOs. Oh, okay, right. And then when I told him where it was, he goes, okay, we're intrigued. I said, now, if you want to help me and work with me, I said, I would love to tell you some of the things I'd like to have your cameras do. And one of them is not use JPEG,
Mm.
right?
Oh, so you can't even modify the camera system to not compress.
Nope,
You can't just
nope.
run it to a hard
They've
drive
got it
and
locked down. They got it locked down. But when I told them where it was and what I'm using it for, they're all of a sudden I piqued their interest, if you will.
good. I'm glad that they're peaked. So I mean, so there are
Yeah.
some natural explanations that are offered for places like Skinwalker where you have a lot of these anomalies, and some of them are like that they're, underwater, you know, waterways or underground waterways that are channeling a bunch of really mineral rich water that's
Cause an
electromagnetic,
electric field, magnetic field. Yeah.
which
I
is
mean, there's all
totally
sorts of stuff.
plausible. Yeah, but I'm not sure how that would affect this sort of camera operation. I mean, maybe if the sensors were mounted on some piece, some.
You know what? Until I'm done trying to get, we'll call it the mundane reasons out of the way, I'm not going there. Right.
Oh,
Um, Other than to say this is where it is and this is what I'm seeing. Um, so right now, my leading hypothesis is IR reflecting off of the tree back into the camera. And so the other thing I did is I actually bought another camera from a completely different company, and I have it out there. And so what I still need to do, I've got it out there, but I just don't have it completely rigged up yet. But I need to do is put it such it's got a very similar optical problem, right, in terms of that trunk, and then switch the one camera out. So I got a good camera and they'll put it there. And if I can get that reproduced in both images, and then what I want to do is just take it and rotate it slightly so that I know the IR is not being reflected off that tree trunk to my right, or to the camera's right, which would obviously be over
yeah.
here,
I'll-
back into it.
Well, that's,
So,
I mean,
I mean, that's just
it's really interesting because
good.
this is a great demonstration of like how to think through this stuff and how like in
Yeah,
a way how boring it is and mentally taxing it is to try to think through like, I mean, there's like 100 different things that could be going on to make an image do
yep,
something weird. Yeah.
yep.
But you're convinced enough that there's something going on in these locations that you like bought a piece of land specifically to do this sort of research. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you're not a crazy person. Like from
I,
everything,
I, I hope not.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, but to be honest, like the Skinwalker Ranch show has, I am not impressed so far. It seems,
Okay, so yeah, don't get me going on that. So
I want to get you going on that. Tell me your,
okay, good. Then let's get going on that.
okay,
Hopefully, I know Travis. I've talked to Travis
yeah,
a couple of times. I
smart
actually
guy.
interviewed at Radiance. Both Jay Stratton and Travis were there interviewing me. I decided to take this other position. And then, right for the SCU conference, Robert and I were invited over to Jay's house for, one of his, I would say pre-SCU conference party, if you will. And, I will tell you that prior to season last year, I had I would say probably about 5 to 10 minutes just alone with Travis, and I asked him a question. I said, "Okay, so are you seeing any temporal anomalies out at the ranch out there?" And he goes, "I don't want to talk about it." I go,
Hmm.
"Okay, so the answer is yes."
Yeah, sounds like it.
I go, "Now let me tell you why I'm asking the question, right?" And so I came to the conclusion that a lot of what they're seeing could be explained by temporal anomaly. And so, what would be a temporal anomaly? It would be a location in space where time flows at a different rate than time around that location. Okay. And so if you think about the LiDAR images and the spiral, the spike spiral of coming out of the LiDAR, I mean, speed of light should be the same in every direction, but if it's flowing
That
slightly
time's flowing
differently,
differently. Yeah.
right, in one location, that could cause that. And so, but what's causing that temporal anomaly is still, up for debate, right? But be that as it may, fundamentally what I'm saying is that path length is some way different, even though it's not literally physically taking it, or it shouldn't be taking a different path. So you could say, well, maybe space is warped. That's also a possibility. Anything that's going to cause that the time for it to go through that area, right, is different. And so that's why I call it a temporal anomaly, the cause of which we don't know what it is, right? His hypothesis, obviously, is it's a wormhole or Lorentzian wormhole. And I would say the jury is still out on that as well. But fundamentally, and I've tried to politely poke at both Brandon and a little bit on this, is when are you guys going to start publishing? Okay.
That'd be great.
I know I've seen Twitter feeds where he's calling people pigs because he wants to release the data. Well, great. Okay. I'm going to tell you from a scientist standpoint, you can go look at all the big science endeavors. They hold the data close to vest until they're ready to publish. Okay. My hope is at some point we start to see these guys publishing, and when they do publish, they are also releasing the data.
Yes.
That's good science. Now, we can argue that they're not doing good science right now because of, I would say, a lot of the behaviors I see on the show. Full disclosure, I started emailing Eric Bard and Brandon, like, almost right after the first episode, because I'm out here in Utah, scientist. Found out Brandon Fugel was actually our landlord for the building that Aerospace was leasing.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Um, so it was kind of funny. I found his email through Collier's, emailed him, and I says, "Hey, I work for the Aerospace Corporation out here at Falcon Hill." And he goes, "Oh, I know all about Falcon Hill." And so he put me in touch with Eric. And so Eric and I emailed for, literally almost 2 years straight. We don't email anymore. Last season I said, okay, this will be my last email. I did send him a couple of feedbacks, but didn't receive a response, but I don't expect to either.
Because
But
you're sort of critical of the way that
well,
science.
I was very, very, very supportive to start off, giving them ideas. I don't want to get into too much detail about and kind of the kind of stuff I gave them, but I will tell you, I know for a fact I had a positive impact on the show in terms of things that they did, or things that they eventually did. And uh, there were some ideas in there that, I would give them the idea, and the next year I'd see them doing it.
Hmm.
And I tell people, I don't know whether I gave them the original idea. I can't swear to that, but I can tell you that I, had suggested the same thing. Right.
There's a correlation, certainly. Yeah.
I would just say it was a happy correlation. Glad to see him do it. And in a lot of the cases, they actually got information from it to help them lead them down the path they're in now. But fundamentally, I would hope that they would say, okay, yes, we're planning on publishing eventually at some point in the future, and this data will become public data, right? That's my hope. My hope is they go there. Right now, I still see it as them trying to do a lot of poking the hornet's nests type of approaches. Um, Travis is the Rocket City redneck, uh, um, let's say, background, and so his approach is fire rocket at it, right?
Yeah.
There may be other approaches, and maybe they're doing them, maybe they're not. But I will tell you that Eric told me, first off, since the type of show it is, I just get the feeling that their scientific hands are really kind of tied because of the TV show approach, which frustrates me from a scientist standpoint. They may not have a say in it. It may be all about, trying to continue
Yeah.
the
Production value.
show. Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's such a conflict of interest. I mean, I've watched both the first and second season of the show, but almost in a, I mean, my partner ref eventually started refusing to watch it with me because I would get so angry every episode, just go on
Oh,
rants and things
oh.
because
So
it's
why am I doing this? My
yeah.
wife got tired of hearing me yelling at the TV set. Okay.
Oh, so you're gonna go do it yourself. Okay, I mean, that's a totally different approach. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
if I had the money, maybe I would do it myself too. But their conflict is like, okay, you've got Brandon Fugel bought a piece of land where weird stuff happens and wanted to research it and also wanted to make it a really entertaining, profitable um venture. Those two, you sort of have to choose one or the other. You can either like rigorously research something.
Well, I disagree. And so Ben Hansen and I have talked about this. I
Okay.
told Ben. So the
Can
first time I talked to Ben, though, Robert Powell and I were interviewing him for a podcast. And it wasn't the first thing I asked him, but eventually I asked him, I said, okay, you want some criticism? And basically I kind of tore him apart a little bit on the Geiger counter example that, they went and he said, okay, there's this UFO in New Mexico. I can't remember the case, but it had anomalously high radiation readings. Even I could hear it, on the TV. But then I said, did you sample around it? Did you go make sure that that wasn't just normal for that area, right?
yeah,
You just happened to be sitting in a hot spot in New Mexico where you had a uranium mine close to it or whatever, right? And so he said, yeah, he goes, I did. He goes, I've got additional readings. He goes, I wanted the production company to allow me to put into a podcast or a YouTube some of the other stuff I did, but they wouldn't let me. I.e., he didn't have producer
yeah.
um,
He didn't ask for the rights
rights,
to do exactly.
right?
Yeah,
And so I told him, I go, I'll tell you my biggest frustration is I see this kind of stuff, and as a scientist, when I see it, it's going to make me doubt the field.
yeah,
That's what it
absolutely.
does. And there's ways to do it right. And so I've been working with him, to try and, hopefully we can get a production company that's willing to do it right. And I told him there's a ways to do it. There's ways you can get your drama and you can get the science out too. So the scientists look at, okay, they're doing good science, right? And so the goal is you go in with the knowledge you're gonna publish. Your goal is to publish papers out of it. So you're gonna do stuff that's scientifically sound, right? And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna just, okay, this is the methodology, this is what I did, here's the data, here's the paper, move on, right? Or improve, right? Okay, I did this last time. This is the new approach I'm taking to try, remove this possibility.
But
There's
if you're going
ways
in
you
with
can.
a production company, aren't you committed to finding something interesting? And it just might not reality might just not be on your side.
And I would say the new series, I mean, gosh, I wish I could remember that. Chrissy. I just know Chrissy's the one
Chrissy
that's on it.
Newton. Yeah.
Yeah, Chrissy. Yeah, I met her at the SU conference. Very nice
Great.
lady. And I can tell that, when she's going out there, she's pulling, okay, all the experts looked at it, right? And they're doing it in a way to where they've had experts behind the scenes going off and look at these different cases. And the person sitting across the table may not like the answer, and I feel for the gentleman from California if they said it was an ISS. I mean, but I can tell you as a scientist, if I will use whatever information you give me. If all you're going to give me is a witness account, I will do my best to say, okay, well, you said you did it at 7:15. Well, I can tell you at 7:22, the ISS was going right over in exactly the same location of the sky. That's perfectly reasonable. But what's even better, right, is a camera that I know has got an image like what I did for, the UFO over New York City or the UAP case with the Starlinks. So,
So what convinced you then that there's a there enough for you to put down the stakes and move forward?
well, I would say that I can't, I come down to, I've got three conclusions, or mainly two. A third one I won't talk about. Either they're telling the truth or they're lying. And the only way I'm going to get at it based on the fact that they're not publishing papers and giving me the data is to go put my own equipment out there.
Hmm.
So actually, I started talking to Ryan Barnes for Space Wolf. He and I talked quite a bit. Fundamentally, when push came to shove, he backed out, which is why I then turned around and bought my own property. And now we've been talking again now that I'm a local property owner, and now he's a little bit more interested again for having me do stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Yeah. You
so
positioned yourself well, at least.
let's say again.
You positioned yourself well. I mean, like as a property owner now, you have some
Yeah.
sway.
Well, and in fact, it was kind of funny because when I was at aerospace, I wanted to get into this and they wouldn't let me. I mean, I could do it behind the scenes, just emailing to Eric type thing, or others, but I couldn't be public like I am now. I couldn't be saying, "Hey, I'm the guy doing this," and be able to talk about it, be able to do it just publicly out in the open. So.
So what's your dream scenario for how to study this? You've got this piece of land. Now, if you had like unlimited
If
budget and resources,
if I had an investor, literally what I would do, and in fact, I've already told Robert that I'll probably put together a proposal for the SCU. As a board member, I'll have to abstain from voting on it, but the proposal would be to start coming up with what I'll call test ranges and hotspots. If Ryan's on board, and what we can do is utilize my property, his property, hopefully eventually additional properties in the area. I've talked to a lot of the property owners around me. I would say right now they're I would say conservative and probably rightfully so, right?
yeah, sure.
But I've at least got Ryan. Ryan says he does know others that may be willing to also support. So and he's got, for example, UFO DAP. I talked to Ron Olds. We're going to try and potentially get some additional UFO DAPs out there on my property. And I'll, be doing a little bit more on the security side to keep things secure there. The goal this year is to get a fence on it. And I'm probably going to put an electric boundary around it as well. Primarily keep animals out, no
Mhm.
other reason. Um, and then from that, I've got neighbors that are great. So hopefully the neighbors will, help pitch in on the security as well. And then have the ability to have investigators come out there. I talked to UAPX, Matt, and don't even ask me to pronounce his last name. But
Like this,
um,
yeah.
yeah, so I talked to Matt. He's game for coming out there. Again, I got Ron. There's a guy that was at the SCU conference that also bought his UFO DAP equipment. I talked to him.
Maybe Kevin, Kevin Knudsen.
Uh, I thought it was David. He had it in the back room. Was it Kevin? I thought it was
I
David.
wasn't,
So,
I wasn't there. I wasn't actually at
oh,
the.
I thought you were there. Okay. But no, so somebody had UFO DAP system there. And so one of the things I've talked to Ron about is start making modifications and I'll say custom builds, right?
Mhm.
But my goal would be to come up with a hotspot test range. And, for Brandon and all the criticism he's getting, now you've got an independent source, right? That's also doing stuff that could potentially be a corroboration. My goal, though, is going to be the science aspect. I'm not going to be shooting the rockets off. I'm not going to be doing anything to prod. All I'm going to be doing is taking data. And
Yeah, their
so,
prodding approach seems to me like simultaneously a weird scientific sort of I don't know, impulse on their part, and also like theatrics. Like they'll get laser arrays and just shine a bunch of really cool looking lasers, but I know as you know, I know enough science to know that that's really more spectacle
it
than.
yeah, it depends on what you're after. I know Mick West was a little hard on him with the recent episode where they shined it up, right?
Hmm.
And they saw an X and it splits, and he's like, "Well, it's a cloud."
Yeah,
Well, okay, great. So, great, Mick. Thank you. Well, I love you to death, man. But okay, now, okay, Travis and Eric, what are you going to do to counter what he said? All right. Now, uh, independence is good. One of the things I give them a B plus in the fact that they have others come in with their equipment, right?
sure. Yeah.
That I give them a B plus, only because I don't give them an A is because they haven't released the data. They haven't published any papers. Um, and so, it's just trying to come up with, I'll say, a little more removed from exactly on the ranch, but we should be able to put equipment out there that we should be able to corroborate, some of what they're saying, or on the opposite side, if they're lying, which I'm going to trust the scientific method, that they're not, and that, there's stuff going on out there.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's also a history. I mean, Rob Bigelow owned the place
Yep.
beforehand, and there's some reason to suspect that smart people who know how to do science think.
Yeah, but everybody I talk to that's a super critic about that says, well, there was somebody lived out there for, I can't, you have to go to Wikipedia, right? And they never had a single a report of anything.
That's not really a
Um,
criticism. I mean, like the
but that's what they use to
phenomenon.
criticize the fact that now it's just being used for a money-making venture.
Oh, well,
And
but that might be true, but the fact that some
right,
people lived there and didn't see anything doesn't compel me to just as a sort of analytic thinker to
I
think,
know, but it's a criticism, right? And
sure,
so
I get it.
when I hear those criticisms, great. Let me go my own stuff out there. I'm going to pound on the data integrity part, have others come out just like, they are doing, put equipment out there and see if we catch anything. I've shown you what I've got, and all I can say is it's anomalous. I'm trying to resolve it. I'm trying to figure out why it's doing what it's doing. I've got some suspicions on this fisheye, but the other one, all I can do is throw up my hands and say, I don't know.
And this is just your initial system, some trail cams and
Yeah, just trying to put
just
something out there so I can see what's going on in my property. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think it's fascinating. I think in the future I'd love to hear once you've got things set up and start collecting some data, what you're thinking about it. So I want to shift back to the UAP subject now.
Okay.
I One of the questions I'm trying to get everybody I interview to answer is like,
Mhm.
what's your dream UAP research project? Like if you had unlimited resources, unlimited power, and unlimited uh, you know, access, what would you put together to try to study and answer questions?
If actually, I'm going to be talking to the individual that was the dean out here at the University of Utah, and I'm going to say, okay, he just retired as the dean. His name is Dean Rich Brown for the engineering school. I knew him when I was on their industry board. So they have an industry advisory board, and I was a member of it for quite some time. Um, until I left aerospace. Now I'm not on anymore. But fundamentally, what I'd be saying is, how can we build a UAV UAP center of excellence?
Mm,
And so Utah is ideally situated. I would say there's a little bit of angst between University of Utah and Utah State. If you know Utah State, they have the Space Dynamics Lab there, which is UARC. Apparently, University of Utah also tried to do it, but they didn't win it. Utah State did. And so I would say University of Utah, we've already got Rich Medina, Dr. Medina, and myself publishing UAP related stuff out of here. So it'd be, building a center of excellence for UAP studies and then trying to come up with a coalition of universities. And so that coalition, in my mind, would basically literally have experts in different fields that you could tap into, right, to support whatever type of analysis you wanted to do. To the point where if there actually are biologics, you've got biological experts on there,
mm,
world, honest to God, world experts in different aspects of everything you can imagine UAP study would be involved in. You'd have Caltech with, gravity. You'd have, start picking your who's who's. I think the reason University of Utah is well situated is because of just where we're located and the phenomena out there at Skinwalker, assuming it's correct, right?
mhm,
And so that would be one thing. I would say another thing would be, like I'm saying, come up with a test lab or a test range, if you will, around different hotspots. I can kind of see them doing that with Beyond Skinwalker, right? Trying to identify them. Well, great. Now that you've identified them, let's get them properly instrumented to research the phenomena. Okay. Um, and I would say the identification of it is great. Now I'm going to call it the proper utilization of that, and I'm going to call it a natural resource
mhm,
because it's a natural resource because it can, if it's someplace where it can be it's repeatable. It can be studied. Okay. And that's the first thing you need as a scientist to be able to study something. You got to have some repeatability of it as a key aspect. Now I'm going to go down to another one, being able to actually physically model these things, right? The physics-based modeling that I was trying to do with the Starlinks. Right now, the software is not there. One of the things University of Utah has is one of the world's best uh, physics and imaging um, labs and
mm,
center of excellence. I don't know if you know much about image processing, but there's something called the Utah teapot. A three-dimensional teapot that is it's just a normal teapot, right? But they call it the Utah teapot. And basically it was just we had a professor out here who was doing image processing, image analysis. Adobe came out of here. And so it's like you've got that, I would say, richness in history, that and expertise of professors locally that we could at least, we locally could take on that part of it. And I can go on and on. I really could, but it just gives you, like I would say, my top three right there.
I love it. So, I mean, part of all you'd really need is
Funding.
coalition. Well, you need funding, but it's not like you need to build a new physics lab. What you really need are a group of people who are experts in their fields who are saying, if you give me something that
To
is
study
real data,
data
I will study it.
well, yes and no. Okay. You got people like me that are freaking literally donating every spare moment of their time doing this. I mean, I used to golf. I haven't hit a golf ball in ages.
This is so much more interesting than golf, though.
Well, it's to a degree, yeah, but I honestly don't have much time for, I would say, leisurely activities. Okay, but the point is you got to have the funding. I mean, if you really want to bring in those experts, if you want to grow that next generation of grad student, undergrad student, you got to have funding.
How much funding do you need for this idea?
I'm gonna say I'm gonna use the Eric UARC and the Cirque UARC as great examples. I mean, we're talking easily a few million a year. And we're talking, I don't want to divulge our exact numbers, but it's going to be more than a million and less than a hundred million, right? And so, but it's got to be consistent funding. It's got to go from year to year to year. I would say there got to be research projects that you're putting forward. Right now, you need to, like I said, data integrity on the sensors. You're going to have, so you could have a working group on that. You could be working with the SCU, and maybe the SCU helps organize those universities and pulls that thing together, if you will, right? And identifying different researchers in different parts of the country to research the problem.
How many
Um,
years out would you need funding for?
Currently on these kinds of things, they do it for like in 5 year increments. So I would say a good solid 5 years. You have one base year and you have four option years, right? And then so in that 5 year of funding, you can do a lot of damage, right? Because it's now consistent and you can go after some very specific things. And then the key point is you get professors at universities with grad students. Okay, so you got a cheap source of labor. You're basically growing that next generation that are interested in the topic. You're publishing, and so you're trying to come up with, we'll call it raising the bar on the publications, right? I know I had one of the individuals that actually reviewed my paper. He did what we call a hatchet job on it, or at least he tried, right? And so you know what I'm talking about, a hatchet
Oh,
job?
no, no, yeah,
It's literally
I'm a reviewer and I'm
it's literally trying to tear it down and not giving it any credibility whatsoever. And I literally went through and responded to every single one of his criticisms in a revision of the paper, and we got it accepted at the Space Situational Awareness Conference.
awesome.
So, it's from my standpoint, it's like great, go off and do that because you're an old fogey stogie. But I'm sorry you don't scare me. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had to deal with colonels and generals and SESs that right. So, some old curmudgeon at some university with, three letters doesn't scare me. So
I totally get it. I mean, in philosophy, which is, my discipline, every reviewer does a hatchet job. It's blood sport. Like
yeah,
there's no grace, but it also means that the work that gets published is really, really rigorous, which is,
right.
good to a degree.
Yes. Yes. And you're exactly right. I mean, I know when I was in the A team for software, I mean, we would just literally do this. We go into a software peer review, right? And we would bleed all over it. I mean, it got to the point where the quality assurance team was briefing everybody that was being hired by the company to explain to them our process and said, it's not a personal attack on you. it's how we make the product better,
Mhm.
right?
Oh yeah, it's never personal. I mean, nobody cares about your your personal,
Right. Right.
it's not even on the radar, which makes it kind of can make it a toxic place. But also, if you're trying to push something
Well,
really important forward, it's what you have to do.
what we would do is we would tear each other's papers apart and then we'd go golf at noon for an hour, the lunch break, and then, meet for margaritas, once every 2 to 3 weeks after work. I mean, so we were good friends, but there was work and then there was play,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's where you need to take the entire
But
industry
for now,
at.
Dr. Doug Buettner, thanks for being here.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
The Anomalous Review is a project of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. It's hosted and produced by me, Michael Glosson, and edited by Kelly Michelle. Our theme song was written and performed by Telma Crisanti. Communication and PR work is by Preston Dykes. Our advisory team includes Jennifer Roach, Robert Powell, Richard Hoffman, Joshua Pearson, and Larry Hancock. To find out more about SCU, check out explorescu.org.